Hey guys, welcome back to the vlog. This is episode number 29, and we're keeping the intro dark because we have a late night cash game session at the Aria in Las Vegas. They say nothing good happens after midnight, but hopefully this video will change your mind as we burn the midnight oil and we nearly get ourselves in a lot of trouble. So stick around, hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. The Aria has a really cool, kind of dark aesthetic to it. In my opinion, it was the perfect place for a late night session. We get our table card from the floor and sit down at the 1-3 table in for $500. This is our second session of the day on the content grind for you guys while I'm out here in Vegas. If you haven't seen my first session from this day at the Bellagio, I'll link it in the cards. Go watch that one before this one. But back to the present, they've opened up a new 1-3 table just for us. We're in for 500. Let's see if we can run it up. If you guys have seen episode number 28, you know that this day is not going very well for me. At Bellagio, I didn't play very well, but I didn't run particularly well either. And it looks like the poker gods are trying to make up for it because one of the first hands we look down at is pocket aces and the low jack. Trying not to get too far ahead of ourselves, pocket aces can lose, by the way, just in case you guys didn't know that. That doesn't mean we're going to try and put our whole stack in the middle. So when the under the gun player limps, we ISO up to $20. It's going to fold all the way around. And you know what they say, if it's good for 3, it's good for 20. The under the gun's in there. We're going heads up to a flop in position with $40 in the middle. And it comes out 7-5-5 with 2 diamonds and a club. I feel the same way about this flop as I did in 2020 when my then girlfriend broke up with me. I've got some mixed feelings about it. This isn't going to be a board that favors us necessarily, as middling cards are typically going to be better for the limp calling range. I checked to see if we have the ace of diamonds. We don't, so I decided to check it back for some pot control. There are plenty of worse hands that the under the gun limper will stab on the turn, and we get to keep the pot manageable for when we don't have the best hand. The jack of spades rolls off on the turn, and the limper decides to check on over to us one more time. I'm fairly confident we have the best hand now. It's time to start going for some value. I'm not 100% sure about this size. My brain was kind of on autopilot after playing for 6 hours earlier, so I decided for a small size of $15, around a third pot. I think we could probably bet as big as 35, maybe even full pot here. But the limper's happy we made a 15 as he pretty quickly calls, and when we see the king of clubs on the river, I'm hoping the limper has a hand like king jack that is made runner 2 pair, as we could probably get some chunky value from him on the river. But I'm not so hopeful he has a strong hand as he checks it to us for a third time. Still going to try and go for value though. I don't think he's all that strong, so I don't think we can go super large. I decided to bet out for around 60% the size of the pot, $45 into 70, and our read that he wasn't all that strong was probably correct because he pretty quickly folds. This isn't a big pot, but it's nice to look at aces early in the session, and it's very nice to be dragging a pot. Shortly after this, we'll get a seat change to the 2 seat for a better vlogging angle, and we get blessed with a nice wide shot of the table, wide enough to see the sweet handlebar mustache on the 7 seat over there. His name is Nick. Him and his buddy Vinny are in town. More on them a little bit later. For now, let's focus back on the poker because we are in the hijack. It's folded to us, and we're going to peel ace-queen offsuit. Some call it the parking lot hand. Others call it the premier 4-bet bluffing hand. If you ask me, I'll tell you to call it whatever you want. Just don't call a cold 4-bet shove with it. Whatever you call it, we're going to raise up to $10 here. The cutoff is going to put in the call, and the small blind also puts forward 2 bread chips. I haven't been playing at this table for very long, but the cutoff is definitely a player that I've identified as one I'd like to be in pots with. It seems like we have a pretty profitable spot here, and this spot is about to get a lot more profitable when the flop comes out a beautiful Queen 8 rainbow. We're going to be doing a lot of checking in multi-way pots, especially in the middle of 2 players. So I think it's very good to mix in some strong hands into our checking range. So we check, and the cutoff taps the table with his glasses, signaling the dealer to roll off the 10 of spades on the turn. I'm not the biggest advocate for bluffing multi-way too much, but this is a very good spot to bluff when we've been checked to twice after the cutoff has checked back the flop. I think if I were bluffing, I might size up slightly larger, probably around 2/3 pot. But with ace-queen here, we'd like to keep our customer, so I decided to size down just a little bit. The cutoff calls very quickly, and the small blind folds probably even faster. So we're heads up, there's $60 in the middle, and the river is the king of spades. King-queen grabs lead from us, queen 10 was already ahead on the turn, and our opponent definitely could have also made a straight. But I'm not seeing monsters under the bed, that's why I bought myself a nightlight. We're going to bet for value, and we're going to bet big, and if we get raised, then I'll probably be pretty scared. But we don't have to worry about that, because the cutoff very quickly calls. We roll over our 3 of a kind. The cutoff's a good sport, and he's going to show you guys that he called us with king 10 offsuit. His turn second pair turned into river top pair, or 3 pair if you will. A 3 pair doesn't beat 3 of a kind in this game, so we're going to take down the pot. We've won our first 2 of the night, and we are rolling here late night at the Aria. we picked this next hand up in progress, and we're going to keep it a little bit of a mystery for you guys to start because I peel my hand off camera and raise it up to $10 from the middle position. The low jack player from the last hand is going to call, as is the hijack, and the big blind is coming along for the ride as well. Thank you guys for your patience. I'm now ready to reveal that we have ace jack offsuit. Some might say this is too loose, but then again, some might say that sunshine follows thunder. I'd like you to try and go tell that to the man who cannot shine. If you didn't get that reference, don't worry, it's not for you. It was for me. And the flop kind of seems like it's for me as well, because the dealer fans out ace, queen, 5 with 2 clubs. We make top pair, and probably the best hand. However, so multi-way, I'm going to start off with a check, and it'll check around. The turn brings in the blank 7 of hearts, and when the big blind checks to us, it's time to start getting some value out of our top pair. For half pot, $20 into 40. The low jack is going to call, and the other 2 players get out of the way. So we get to tango with our friend from the last hand, and the river rolls off the ace of clubs. We make 3 of a kind for the second hand in a row, however it does bring in the front door flush draw. I told you guys in the last hand that I'm not scared of monsters under the bed. In fact, I have way too many things crammed under my bed for any monsters to fit down there anyways. So I decide to pull out the old bet fold. I go for $55 into 80. He pretty quickly snap folds. So we've taken down our first 3 pots of the night. For this next hand, we're going to be in the small blind. Action kicks off with a raise from Vinny in the cutoff to $12. He's in town from San Diego, and I heard it never rains in sunny Southern California. But I'm from the Northeast, and let me warn you, Vin, it rains all the time, and I'm getting real sick of you and your nice weather. So I'm going to 3-bet the small blind here up to $48, mostly because I'm jealous of the climate where he lives, but also partially because we do have a fairly good hand. I've gone for a very precise, exactly 4x 3-bet size here. It seems to have confused a bunch of people. The big blind looks very confused before he flicks in the cold call. Vinny's been to a lot of cool parties in Southern California. He's got a lot of cool lived experience, so you know he's never missing the opportunity for a 3-way. He calls in the cutoff to make this a multi-way, multi-bet pre-flop pot. We're going to be first to act with $144 in the middle, and we don't have a pair yet. But hope is not lost as the flop comes out queen 10-7 with 2 clubs. We make top pair, top kicker on a pretty wet board. However, out of position, I'm going to proceed with a little bit of caution here. I'm going to start with a check. And pretty soon after I do that, the big blind turbo ships his stack into the middle for $154. It's a more than pot-sized bet. It's a little bit confusing. Vinny thinks for a while before folding his hand. It's probably unlikely he has pocket queens since we know where half the queens are. But pocket 10s and I guess even pocket 7s could be well represented in his cold calling range. Either way, I've seen this guy get a little bit too crazy for me to want to fold this spot. I'm not really in love with it, but if the big blind wakes up with a better hand than mine, then I'm just going to give him my money here. I stick in the call, unsure if I need to fade or get there, mostly hoping for a blank run out. The 5 of hearts seems safe. The king of diamonds isn't my favorite river, as a hand like king jack gets there. The big blind is slow to show his cards. Before he rolls over pocket 6s, it takes me quite a bit to process. I initially think that the big blind has flopped a set on us, but after a few seconds, I come to my senses and realize that it was just time for the big blind to go to bed. He pretty much donates us $200 here. It's always nice to be catching punts rather than being the one executing them. We get pretty fortunate to make top pair on the flop and to have the big blind go buck wild. With that, we're scooping in a nearly $500 pot, and we are rolling late night here at the Aria. At this point in the night, we're playing 6-handed when we peel Jack Queen in the low jack.
Queen Jack offsuit. Was this the hand we were discussing yesterday, Joe, which you think is actually like the worst starting hand?
Worst hand of all time.
Right, that's it. Worst hand of all time. That's the moniker that you granted it.
This is a little bit loose, but we're going to raise it up to $10. 2 of the players behind me had around a 10% VPIP. And there hasn't been a 3-bet in this game by anyone who isn't currently making a YouTube video out of the session. So I decided to widen up the range a little bit. The big blind is going to come along for the call. Hope to see a flop that's good for our range that we could probably just c-bet and take down. But the dealer outdoes herself when she puts out queen, jack, 8 with 2 clubs. We flop top 2 pair. Typically I would bet this board small with a large percentage of my range. But I think the big blind is a little bit inelastic with his flop continuation range. So I decided to size up exploitatively as I do think he's calling the large size just as often as I'll call the small size. So I go for 12 into 20 and he makes the call. And we see the 7 of spades on the turn. There's now 2 flush draws that we could possibly get value out of, and it's unlikely if we were ahead on the flop we are behind on this turn. Because this is the case, I decided to go for max value here on the turn with an overbet, $65 into 44, with plans of checking back the river unless it's another queen or jack. It doesn't seem the big blind has much though, as he pretty quickly folds, and we take down another pot. I have a pretty strong feeling that some of you keyboard warriors aren't going to like this next hand. It starts off with King Jack suited in the hijack. The low jack is limped, and we're going to ISO up to $15. I think this might be mistake number one. I think I need to be going slightly larger when ISOing limp sizes, because we can see the cutoff is going to put in the call, the button is going to put in the call, and the small blind thinks that $15 is a completely reasonable price. He flicks it in. The limper needs to call $10 to win $75, so he's never folding. He puts forward 2 additional red chips, so we are going 5 ways to a flop, which is decent for us. It's Jack 9-8 rainbow with the 8 of spades. So we have top pair, good kicker, and backdoor straight and flush draws. The small blind and the limper are going to check it on over to me. I'm not a huge fan of betting this multi-way, especially on such a dynamic board. So I check, the cutoff checks, and now the button is going to stab for $15. It's 20% the size of the pot, but still looks fairly strong betting into 4 other players. The small blind calls next to act. The limper is going to call as well. As crazy as it may sound, I think King Jack of Hearts can probably hit the muck here at some frequency. With the backdoor, I think we have just a bit too much equity to let our hand go. I put in the call. The cutoff releases his hand, so we're 4 ways to a turn, in a pot that's ballooning pretty quickly, and it comes the board pairing 8 of hearts. This is not a good card for us. So when it checks to us, I don't think it makes any sense to bet here. I check once again, and the button now checks it on back. The same 4 of us see the deuce of hearts on the river. It's a complete blank, but now the small blind decides to assemble red chips and lead out for $45. Now while this is only a third the size of the pot, it is 3 times the bet size I was put in on the previous streets. So I'm honestly not sure if the small blind thinks this is a big bet or a small bet. He's also probably the most likely player to have an 8. We're getting a good price on the call, but we have the button behind us that bet into 5 players on the flop. So I decide to make a pretty nitty laydown here. The button pretty quickly folds, so let me know how much of a nit I am in the comments. I don't know, King Jack just isn't that good of a hand. For our last hand of the night, the game is dying down. We're playing 4-handed at the moment, and our friend Nick has opened the cutoff to 15. His cousin Vinny has flatted on the button. Ranges are going to be very wide here, and I don't think either of them are all that strong, so these 2 Utes are going to be punished with a 3-bet up to $65. And oh yeah, I have King Jack offsuit, which is a very good hand. I've never said anything bad about it before, ever. Definitely not a case of me just getting a little bit too loose because we're playing short-handed and the game's about to break. So I put in the 3-bet, which is pretty much mandatory with such a premium. Nick pretty quickly gets out of the way, but our cousin Vinny on the button is giving me a look like he doesn't believe me, and he has made me what lawyers like him like to call a counter offer. Apparently option A is that he calls and we fight for the $145 that are in the middle. Or option B is that he believes that I have a strong hand and he folds. After he's thought for a while, I ask him, "Are you going to fold now?" And he says, "Sure. First, let me see your strong hand." And I say, "I have a strong hand." He says, "All right, let me see it. Show it to me." And I say, "Well, I could flop one." He says, "You could flop one? All right, flop a strong hand. Then I'll fold." He then asks a guy at an adjacent table wearing a neck brace if he was rear-ended or if he just fell. I'm not really sure what that's all about, but he sticks in the call, so it turns out it's option A. We're going to be fighting over a $145 pot with a pretty marginal hand. And the flop is no help to us. It comes 9-7-5 with 2 hearts. We have nothing but 2 overcards and a pretend king-high flush draw. Still, I think Vinny can have plenty of hands that won't like to see aggression on this board, such as low pocket pairs, 6s, 4s, 3s, deuces, or some random Broadway cards that haven't connected here, like King Queen, King 10, Queen Jack, Queen 10, Ace 10, and Ace Jack. So I decided to go for a small C-bet, around a third of the pot, $45. He thinks for a while, looks back down at his cards before putting in the call. So we're still going heads up to a turn, in a pot that's getting pretty big, and the turn is the 4 of spades. It brings in a backdoor spade draw, which is definitely a combo that Vinny could have that he's floating on the flop, but I still think he'll have a few hand classes that will fold if we decide to double barrel the turn, primarily some ace-high hands. So I decided to bet out for around half the size of the pot, 125 into 235, looking to fold out better hands like ace 10, ace jack, or if he has a hand like 7-8 suited, pocket 3s, pocket 2s, that floated the flop. My read is that Vinny didn't really want to put in too much money toward the end of the night. I overheard him telling his friend Nick how he's happy to be out of the hole after getting stuck early in the night, and that he's ready to leave soon, so I don't think he's eager to put his whole stack at risk, and I'm trying to capitalize on this. As I glance across the table at him, he looks visibly uncomfortable. He's shuffling his chips very quickly, which I hadn't seen him do earlier in the night. Perhaps this is a nervous tick because this pot is getting fairly large. Regardless of if he looks nervous or not, he's going to put in a call, so we will be playing a river in a pot that is nearly $500 already, and we still have a round of betting left. Hopefully we can make a king or a jack on the river to make life easier for us, but the dealer Ryan has other ideas when he puts out the 8 of hearts. Now I have a little bit over $300 left in my stack, and I am going to use every single one of them to try and get my opponent off his hand. I announced that I'm all in. I told you guys earlier on the flop that we had a pretend king high flush draw, and that's kind of what we're repping here. I could probably also shove over pairs with a heart like aces, kings, or queens. I could also possibly have top set, but value shoving a hand like tens or jacks is probably a bit too thin on this board. So even though the value range we're repping is fairly narrow, I don't think Vinny can be all that strong, and he looks pretty visibly disgusted after we shove. Vinny, I like you, man. Just fold. I always have it. Vin looks back down at his cards one more time to say goodbye to them. As he picks up his cards, he looks back at me and says, I really just don't think you have it. But fortunately for us, he lets his cards go. We tell him he made a good fold and show him the king of hearts. Vin, if you're watching this back now, I'm sorry I lied to you. And he tells us that he was considering calling the river with ace queen of spades for just ace high and a missed backdoor spade draw. We milk out a little extra value with our bet on the turn, that it seems like we left just enough behind on the river to get him to fold. Honestly, if I got called with ace high here, that might be the single most disrespectful thing anyone's ever done to me. We somehow get it through. We've definitely been playing cards for too long when we're starting to try things like this. It's time to rack up and book the win. Alright guys, just wrapped up a really weird session at the Aria up there. Played 1-3 for like 5 or 6 hours. Was in for 500, out for $775. You guys will have seen it. I tried to run like a crazy kamikaze bluff at the end there, and I was trying to get him to fold a lot stronger of a hand than he did have, but made the fold. I don't know. I just kind of like had a gut feeling it's for the end of the night, and that he didn't want to play for his whole stack. I didn't feel like he was that strong when he went flat either. I don't know. Just like a weird one because logically I knew probably not the spot to bluff. But just had like such a strong intuition feeling that he couldn't call. So happy with that. I made the fold, thank goodness. If I got called with ace high there, I maybe would quit poker. We have a rebound session from the last one that you guys saw at the Bellagio where kind of spewed a little bit. Yeah, Aria, very nice room. Really enjoyed this one a lot. Shout out to them. Oh, and after the session, saw Andrew Nemi. Talked to him for a little bit. Really, really nice guy. So that was really nice as well. Anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.